their mark in this treacherous territory.
The appeal of Alaska has always been the blank slate. There are riches to be won here by the person who's got enough grit, determination, and stamina to suffer these conditions.
Measuring 1,400 miles north to south and 2,400 miles east to west, Alaska is 3 times the size of California, and 90% of the state is undeveloped wilderness.
It's 1/5 the landmass of the United States. The coastline is more than half the coastline of the United States, and it has so many different areas and features that it is a staggering thing to try to deal with.
Nowhere else in America have so many jobs been so influenced by the extremes of the environment than in Alaska. Temperatures can drop to 80 below zero. Blizzards can dump 900 inches of snow in a winter. At sea, storms called willowaws produce winds of more than 130 miles an hour.
Working in Alaska is a little bit like working on the moon. It's cold, it's often dark, it's far away from any place else. You face these elements all the time that complicate everything. That's really what signifies Alaska. It's the extremes.
1/3 of the state lies north of the Arctic Circle, where winter keeps a death grip on the land for 10 months a year. The only overland route ever built across Alaska's far north is the legendary Haul Road, one of the most treacherous truck routes on the planet. This highway from hell is home turf for an elite band of truckers who supply Alaska's remote North Slope oil fields and the Trans-Alaska Pipeline. Built in 1974, the route starts just north of Fairbanks and snakes through 400 miles of rugged wilderness to Prudhoe Bay on the Arctic Ocean. 150 miles north of the Arctic Circle, the Haul Road climbs over the Continental Divide at the forbidding Atigun Pass. The wind's blowing 30 miles per hour, and the temperature is 30 below zero. The snow-packed road surface has been polished to a sheet of ice. It's a recipe for disaster.
You better pull me down forward there. I think I lost my clutch.
With more than 200 accidents a year, this is the most dangerous stretch of the entire road.
Yeah, another guy was spinning in front of me, and I tried to get around him, and I hit this little clay spot, and the way she went, I've had better days, that's for sure.
Even with heavy chains on the tires, this 20-ton big rig lost its grip climbing the steep 10% grade.
If I lose the clutch, I'm done.
If he was stuck out here alone, the driver could quickly die of exposure. But he's in luck. The state road crew's Caterpillar grader will tow him up the mountain.
It's probably one of the most unappreciated jobs around the country. People don't realize what you have to go through up here just to get oil and to keep oil flowing through that pipeline. A lot of hard work, a lot of hours. And the cold doesn't help a bit.
Less than 40 years old, the Haul Road has already racked up an impressively bloody track record, killing and injuring 400 people and wrecking thousands of trucks. In 1968, there wasn't a single road on Alaska's North Slope. Then, that February, an exploratory drill rig in Prudhoe Bay struck the largest oil field ever discovered in North America. Big oil companies raced to stake out wells and begin drilling. Thousands of tons of drill pipe and equipment were needed at the remote sites. Without an overland supply route, a highway, the big boom would quickly go bust.
You couldn't hardly find a spot in the United States that would be more isolated for any kind of major resource discovery than Prudhoe Bay, Alaska. Because the oil field was 400 miles virtually from the nearest road, the decision was quickly made, well, we need a road to get here.
In December, the state of Alaska launched the first attempt to construct a road to the North Slope. Wanting to build as fast as possible, crews cut a swath through trees and undergrowth. It took 8 weeks for bulldozers to gouge a primitive 400-mile-long trail across the frozen tundra. In March 1969, a convoy of 20 tractor-trailer trucks struck north on the very first trip up the road. From the start, the rough terrain was a nightmare for the drivers. In the rush to build, the road crews had scraped off the snow and ground cover that insulated the permafrost, the permanently frozen layer of earth just below the surface. Exposed to the sun, the permafrost melted and the roadbed turned to mud. Forced to run in low gear over the rough grades, trucker Charlie Barr found himself crawling along at a tortuous 3 miles per hour.
Well, you're just sitting there rocking smack back and forth like this. It was, it just jar your teeth out. So you're just easing in all the way up. It was very slow. The hours were just as long as the guys could stand it. Just when we never shut down till we couldn't go anymore to get the stuff up there.
The trucks, built for paved highways in the lower 48, couldn't stand up to the punishment. Springs, transmissions, and motor mounts all broke. The drivers had to improvise fixes on the spot. If the rigs couldn't be patched up, they'd be abandoned.
One fellow broke a front spring and took a 20-foot 4x4, and we sawed it off in increments till it built a spring for the front of his truck, and chained it in, and he drove it all the way up and all the way back with that darn 4x4. It worked well.
The trucks got just 1 mile to the gallon, so fuel tankers had to accompany the first convoy to refill the diesel-guzzling rigs. Trucks were kept running 24 hours a day to keep engines from seizing in the sub-zero cold. Each truck burned 80 gallons of fuel a night, just idling. With no camps to shelter them, the men slept in their poorly heated cabs and struggled to keep warm. 200 miles into the trip, the convoy had to climb over the rugged Brooks Range, through 2,000-foot-high Anatuvik Pass. In the mountains, raging blizzards obliterated the road. Luckily, the self-sufficient drivers had carried along their own front-end loader to clear the way.
The worst part about it when you get blown in, why the snow covers in the engine, it plugs off the air cleaners and all that stuff, so you don't get any sleep time. You gotta keep tending the trucks and making sure that you can move when the thing does quit blowing so you can get out of there.
In late April, 450 miles and 23 days after setting out on the pioneering road trip, the exhausted convoy staggered into the oil well camps and delivered their loads. The intrepid truckers had proven that the North Slope could be reached overland, but at a heavy cost.
You know, it's tough, really tough. The worst trucking I've ever done in my life. This is when I first started getting bald-headed.
After the spring thaw, the road turned into a muddy, impassable river. It was used once more the next winter and then abandoned. The state's pioneered truck trail was a dismal, wet failure. The next attempt to reach the oil-rich North Slope by road would be on a much grander scale. The new highway would earn infamy as the Kamikaze Trail, one of the wildest and most dangerous road trips on Earth. In 1974, 5 years after the dismal failure of the first haul road, work began on an improved road to Alaska's North Slope. The new highway would start just north of Fairbanks and travel 400 miles to Prudhoe Bay. It would serve as the supply route and staging ground for the construction of the Trans-Alaska Pipeline. An invasion force of 3,000 road workers attacked the Arctic wilderness. "800 pieces of heavy machinery rolled in. Learning from the muddy mistakes of the earlier road, engineers built a raised roadbed on top of the fragile tundra. Gravel fill 3 to 8 feet high was laid down to insulate the permafrost below. While one crew worked north from the Yukon River, another blazed a path south from Prudhoe Bay. Working around the clock, the road crews moved 24 million cubic yards of gravel and rock. In November, the two forces met up in the middle. It had taken just 5 months to construct an all-weather, 30-foot wide road across the uncharted Arctic. The price tag was $125 million, more than $500 million in today's dollars. With the new haul road in place, construction of the Trans-Alaska Pipeline got underway in 1975. The promise of billions in profits spurred the oil companies to get the pipeline built as fast as possible, whatever the cost. Black gold fever hit the nation. A stampede of adventure seekers rushed north, hoping to cash in on Alaska's oil bonanza.
The hazards of working in Alaska, are indisputably high. But the appeal, in part, is the same reason why people buy lottery tickets, is because they always think, well, somebody's got to win, and somebody's got to come out on top, so why not me? So Alaska, in a way, has been the America's lottery.
In Fairbanks, there were hundreds of miles worth of steel pipe waiting to be hauled north. With an extremely tight construction schedule, the pipeline's success rested with the truckers, whose Herculean task was to move mountains of construction supplies up the untested road. Thousands of teamsters were hired and handed the keys to a fleet of brand new trucks. Overnight, the haul road became one of the busiest highways in the country.
It was like a non-stop, sort of a land version of the Berlin airlift, except this is the Alaska North Slope land lift. All this stuff was being trucked north in a non-stop convoy. It was a challenge. However you spell challenge, this was it.
The truckers couldn't deliver pipe fast enough to the 18 remote construction camps scattered between Fairbanks and Prudhoe Bay. As soon as the steel pipe was offloaded, it entered a massive assembly line where a wilderness army of 20,000 pipeline workers labored nonstop. With hazards and obstacles lurking around every bend, it took the truckers 3 days to make the 1,000-mile round trip. 100 miles from the start, the trucks hit the mighty Yukon River. A $150 million bridge, the first ever to span the Yukon, was under construction, but would take at least another year to complete. 2 giant hovercrafts were custom built to ferry the trucks across the half-mile wide river. With 160-ton payloads, they could carry 4 loaded trucks at a time. The haul road climbed more than 100 hills and mountains. Many had grades exceeding 18%, more than 3 times steeper than the maximum grade allowed on interstate highways. The underpowered 300-horse engines weren't up to the task, and the trucks got stuck on the long, steep grades. Drivers compensated by using the downhills to build up speed and momentum. A risky maneuver on the narrow road, it was the only way to carry the 130,000-pound trailers up the big mountains. The 80-foot-long loads made negotiating sharp corners a nightmare. Special trailers were designed with self-steering rear wheels to help ease the long loads around curves. But the trailers caused more problems than they prevented.
The designers thought the self-steering trailer would go around the corner, and it would. But if you hit brakes on that self-steer, it would go sideways. And that's what caused a lot of them to go in the ditch.
Many of the newly arrived flatlanders from outside of Alaska had never driven on gravel. The combination of equipment problems and inexperience was disastrous.
There would be trucks spun out or slid down the hills. They would be in the ditches. They were constantly all over. Every corner, every hill was a problem.
In just 2 years, there were 500 accidents on the road, killing and injuring 100 people. The haul road earned a telling nickname, the Kamikaze Trail. It even spawned a hit record in 1976 that became the anthem for the wild heyday of hardcore Alaskan trucking.
Now there's a road up north of Fairbanks, the Kamikaze Trail's well known. It's a challenge to any truck driver who really likes to carry their own.
The frequent wrecks and traffic jams caused delays that threatened the tight schedule. But the truckers matched the frantic pace of pipeline construction, hauling in 19,000 loads of pipe and over 3 million tons of supplies.
Oh, whoever thought that a bunch of flatlanders would be trucking on the Kamikaze Trail?
In May 1977, the last 2 pipe sections on the 800-mile line were welded together. It had taken 3 years and over $8 billion to build the pipeline. Since its completion, a staggering 15 billion barrels of Alaska crude has flowed south through the Trans-Alaska Pipeline. More than 4,000 drivers had overcome very long odds to make the pipeline possible. For those who labored on the epic project, it was all the adventure they had bargained for and more.
I would compare it to an astronaut that gets to go to space. At the time, you know you're doing something that's going to make history, basically, because it was one of the wonders of the world when they built it. Today, 30 years after the oil fields began producing, the North Slope is booming all over again. With prices skyrocketing, oil companies are racing to build new facilities, drill more wells, and pump more black gold. Once again, it's up to the haul road warriors to get the freight through on time. But in the brutal Arctic winter, lethal surprises lie in wait for these modern truckers, threatening to make their deadly trek a living hell. February in Coldfoot, Alaska, the northernmost truck stop in the world. It's located halfway up the 400-mile-long haul road, a brutal trek that is one of the most challenging and dangerous truck driving jobs there is. The temperature is 40 degrees below zero. In the extreme cold, metal turns brittle, and motor oil and diesel fuel stop flowing. Winter is when the monster trucks of freight hauling start heading north, the heavy hauls. This convoy is moving a 130-foot-long crude oil heater unit. 16 feet wide, 2 stories tall, and weighing 250,000 pounds, it's headed to a refinery near Prudhoe Bay. Just a month before, this same load flipped off the road 100 miles into the trip. The driver survived, but it cost $250,000 to repair the damage. Now they're making their second attempt to get the unit all the way to Prudhoe Bay. Moving this massive load requires not 1, but 3 of the world's most powerful tractor trucks. They're custom built to handle the harsh conditions and heavy weights. The frame is reinforced with double steel rails,
and the wheelbase is stretched 6 feet for extra stability. Heavy-duty axles and springs cushion the rough road shock. Jumbo fuel tanks hold 400 gallons of diesel for the long haul. And the standard 400-horse engine has been replaced with a supersized 600-horsepower motor. On the road, the lead heavy-haul driver pulls the load and coordinates the operation. The 2 other truckers push from behind using heavy rubber pusher plates. The push drivers, driving blind at 50 miles an hour, have to put their trust in the lead driver to steer them. This drive will be the ultimate test of the trucker's skills and stamina. First, they must climb the high peaks of the Continental Divide. Then they have to cross the stormy North Slope before finally reaching Prudhoe Bay. Throughout the year, the fierce Arctic elements wage a constant assault on the haul road. Heavy rains transform the gravel road into a minefield of potholes. Avalanches and landslides bury whole sections without warning. During the spring thaw, the road is flooded and washed out. In the summer, the surface is pounded into a bone-rattling washboard that takes a toll on man and machine. Flat tires, broken struts, and snapped tie rods are common.
Well, it's horrible. Just beats the truck to death. You know, it falls apart. And then, of course, we're around it, falling apart with it. When you get back to town after a trip and you have to hang on the railing to keep from falling on the ground, I mean, that's bad then. I mean, because you're so stiff and sore, it's just like you've been run over by that truck instead of just driving it. It's pretty rough.
The state of Alaska spends $12 million a year trying to keep the 400 miles of gravel in one piece.
It's falling apart just as fast as we can put it back together. Once winter comes in and the ground freezes, the road will be nice and solid and smooth until next spring, and come break up, it'll all start over again.
The road crews rebuild damaged sections with high-float emulsion, a blend of asphalt, water, and soapy detergents that hold the mix together. Gravel is laid on top of the hot oil and rolled out. When the high float cures, it creates a durable surface that looks like regular asphalt pavement, but flexes without breaking up. In winter, road crews spray the gravel with water to form a thick layer of ice. The water fills in the ruts before freezing, producing a smooth and fast-driving surface. It's a necessity for the heavy haul trucks as they speed north. The hard, frozen surface supports the massively heavy load without collapsing, as the gravel would in summer. But keeping the extra-wide trailer on the narrow, icy road takes nerves of steel.
You're taking up the whole road. You got to look out for the load, the people coming at you. At the best of times up here, this road will hurt you. That split second you are not taking care of business, off the road you go.
There's danger around every bend. A southbound truck in a hurry tries to slip by the convoy. It's a near miss.
He's taking his life in his own hands to do that. If I run off the road, I'm jeopardizing my life. I'm not going to do that. You're going in a ditch.
50 miles north of Coldfoot, the monster trucks prepare to take on the mighty Brooks Range. The only way through is Adigan Pass. At an elevation of 4,800 feet, it's the highest, most northern pass kept open during the winter in the entire world. The road cuts across 40 avalanche slide paths. Truckers running this gauntlet are like sitting ducks in a deadly shooting gallery. More than 200 avalanches hit the pass each year. Traveling at speeds of 70 miles per hour, they can bury stretches of road under 20 feet of snow. In 1993, 6 trucks were caught in a massive avalanche. The big rigs were tossed off the road. Miraculously, no one was killed. After this near tragedy, the state of Alaska declared war. From September through June, an avalanche patrol prowls the pass for impending slides. They're armed with a breech-loading 105mm recoilless rifle that dates from the Korean War.
These bullets that we're firing are actually manufactured in 1952 or 1953. And we haven't had a dud with them or a misfire within the last several years. It's wonderful stuff.
Packed with 4.5 pounds of TNT, each steel shell is perforated to allow propellant gases to escape out the gun's breech when fired, greatly reducing the recoil. The breech blast is so powerful, it will kill anyone standing up to 100 feet behind the gun. The shock wave from the shell's impact triggers a controlled slide the size of a football field. These preemptive strikes take down small slides before they can grow to killer proportions. Once they've cleared the pass of avalanche danger, the road is reopened to traffic, and the heavy haul convoy is ready to take a run at the mountain. The road over Adigan Pass is a hefty 10% grade, one of the steepest on the entire highway. It takes all 3 trucks straining at full power to keep the 125-ton load moving up the mountain. To provide extra traction on the snow, the truckers attach heavy chains to the rear drive wheels. Each push truck carries 50,000 pounds of concrete weights. If a push truck slips or breaks contact, the massive load could spin out of control and slide off the road. Over the last 30 years, hundreds of trucks have wrecked while challenging the steep slopes of Adigan Pass. Today, the traction is good, and the convoy makes it safely over the pass. With the mountains finally at their backs, the truckers still face 150 miles of white-knuckle driving through some of the worst weather on Earth. Alaska's North Slope is infamous for its blows. Winter storms that sweep down along the coastal plain with hurricane-force winds. The storms produce one of the most hazardous road conditions there is, the dreaded whiteout. Truckers depend on reflector poles that mark the road's edge every 20 feet to guide them. In low visibility, the delineators are the only things standing between the driver and near certain death out on the frozen tundra. But in whiteout conditions, visibility drops to 0, and truckers are forced to stop in the middle of the road and wait out the storm. It's taken up to 4 days for road crews to reach the stranded trucks and guide them to safety. If the truckers are lucky and don't get caught in a blow, they're home free. The heavy haul convoy finally arrives at Prudhoe Bay after 4 long days on the road. Even though it's in the middle of the night, the trucks are escorted directly to the outlying oil refinery to offload. Prudhoe Bay is the central hub for the giant petroleum fields that sprawl out across the North Slope. 20,000 trucks a year make it all the way here to the end of the road. After unloading, the haul road truckers turn around and head back down the Kamikaze Trail. It's a challenge the extreme truckers relish taking on, trip after dangerous trip.
I'm willing to go head-to-head with nature here. The slick roads, the snow. Of course, they experience that in the lower 48 too, but down there, traffic comes to a halt. We got to keep going. It's a normal day.
Getting around